Okay, welcome to OKSA Connects. OKSA Connects is an interview series aimed at connecting Oklahoma youth care professionals, foster parents, group home providers, and other supportive adults with resources and information on a variety of issues that impact the lived experiences of Oklahoma youth in foster care. This series and all the services provided by the Oklahoma Successful Adulthood Program are funded by the Oklahoma Department of Human Services and coordinated by the University of Oklahoma National Resource Center for Youth Services. Our guests include local service providers, thought leaders, young innovators, and foster care advocates. All participants will have an opportunity to ask questions after the interview. I'm James McKenzie. I'm with the University of Oklahoma, and I'm the training manager for the Oklahoma Successful Adulthood Program. And on this edition of OKSA Connects, we are joined by principal and founder of Unicorn Solutions, Elliot Hinkle. We are celebrating the start of Pride Month by uplifting the experiences of LGBTQIA plus youth in Oklahoma and elsewhere. We will discuss current trends among queer youth, intersectionality, and ways we can all create affirming, inclusive spaces in our homes, at our works, and in the community at large. So let me introduce our guest, Elliot. Elliot Hinkle is an alumnus of the Wyoming foster care system. They are an advocate for youth impacted by child welfare, mental health, and the LGBTQ community as the principal and founder of Unicorn Solutions. They graduated from Portland State University in June of 2016 with a bachelor's degree in women, gender, sexuality, and queer studies. And while completing their degree, they worked at the Regional Research Institute at PSU as a coach on the My Life and Better Futures project. Nationally, Elliot works as a consultant for the National Capacity Building Center for States at ICF International and at JBS International, supporting state reviews of their national youth in transition database efforts. Since 2014, they've been a trainer of Youth Thrive and are a certified trainer of Youth Thrive for Youth. They have served as commissioner and vice chair to the Oregon Governor's Child Foster Care Advisory Commission. Previously, they worked as a My Life coach and LGBTQ specialist on the PDX Connect team at New Avenues for Youth in Portland, Oregon. And as previously stated, Elliot is the principal and founder of Unicorn Solutions. In addition to supporting individuals and organizations as a consultant, Elliot works full-time as the Youth Young Adult Coordinator for Oregon Healthy Transitions Grant at PSU. Elliot is also a member of the LGBTQ Exchange, that's with an X, for Change team, and is the executive editor and co-host of the Exchanges podcast. Welcome, Elliot.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you, James.
My goodness, that was a mouthful. You are a busy person.
Yeah, but it keeps me going. It keeps me
Definitely. I love the name Unicorn Solutions, not because of the obvious call to LGBTQ community, but also the idea of unicorns being creative, out of the box, not your everyday thing. Tell us a little bit about Unicorn Solutions.
Yeah, so Unicorn Solutions is the LLC I was able to start this year with COVID and having some time on my hands. I've been consulting for the past 10 years, but wanted to formalize that. In my personal life, and I think more and more in my professional life, people kind of equate me to a unicorn. It's definitely worked out as free branding. So it just made sense that unicorn would be a way to bring in some fun into the professional world, but also thinking about magical or creative solutions for some of the world's problems. I can't solve them all, but I want to be someone who comes to the table ready to be creative and a thought partner. And my focus has been on young people impacted by systems. So child welfare, youth mental health, and LGBTQ youth. And Unicorn Solutions just gives me an opportunity to continue building on the training, consulting, and policy work I've been doing.
Well, that's great. And I'm so glad you're with us today and bringing your knowledge and your passion for this issue. So thanks to increased visibility over the years, I would imagine most folks in our audience watching are aware of Pride Month and have some awareness that it's about uplifting members of the LGBTQ community. I'm sure many folks are aware of Pride parades that occur in their various cities all over the country during the month of June. However, sometimes the history and the complex meaning of Pride can get a little lost in the commercialism and the kind of the pomp and circumstance of the parades and stuff like that. So let's just kind of start with the basics. What is Pride, and both in terms of history and what it means today?
Yeah, so Pride really relates to the Stonewall riots in New York back in the 70s, I believe. Not a historian, but Stonewall is really a core piece of like where the community fought back and said, we're tired of the police telling us that we can't have queer spaces and we can't be who we are. So that really was a time when, we saw queer and trans people of color leading the way and pushing back and fighting back and saying we deserve to be here, we deserve to be who we are. And how that's really carried forward in today is you see pride parades, which also started, from that, people wanting to be seen and be visible and to be who we are and to celebrate that. But I think pride is a really nuanced and big meaning. Pride is also about grief and loss and celebrating what we have and remembering what we've had to go through. And today, I think it just means pride is a month, sure, but it's also all the time. It's being able to be proud of who I am and walking that out and being visible for other people because I'm able to be and not everyone can. And pride means, showing up authentically and getting to be loved and affirmed in who we are. So pride has lots of meanings, but it wouldn't be what it is today without Stonewall and so many queer and trans people of color who kind of did the work for us to
Yeah, exactly. And I think you bring up such a good point about this idea of visibility, right? And because I think the opposite, that experience of being invisible or even just feeling like another, right? And I'm putting that in quotes, this feeling of being other than really impacts the day-to-day lives of individuals in this community. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and kind of, and how that affects those day-to-day lives?
Yeah, so I think visibility is important. I think when I was a young person, I didn't really see people who looked like what I felt inside, both sexuality and gender. I grew up in Wyoming and there was a lot of amazing people I met growing up, but there was a lot of people who also didn't think that LGBTQ people should be who they are. And that was layered by conservatism and religion and all of that. And so for me, being visible and proud is about being who I am and not letting myself be stopped by the feelings and thoughts of other people. In the sense that, like, if someone's uncomfortable with my identity, that's not about me. That's about that. And
Sure.
visibility for me is important, but it's a tricky one. Visibility without protection is kind of a trap, right? Without that
Yeah.
safety, you're visible, so you've also been made vulnerable. So when I go to Southern Oregon, I feel very differently about who I am and how I am than I do in the middle of Portland and downtown, right?
Right.
So it's contextual, it changes all the time, but I think it's really crucial that at least portions of the community that can be are visible so that youth, families, everyone sees the things that they may not encounter if they didn't seek it out themselves. And I just don't want to hide anymore in closets of any kind. I just want to be able to be Elliot, the unicorn, fully myself, and proud of
Yeah.
that. Because I think the otherism that comes up, um, that's some of the stuff that leads to these like poor mental health outcomes. That it's not because I'm queer that I have harder mental health experiences. It's actually the stigma or other people and the social context that we live in that can actually bring that upon the community. So I think fighting against that and having visibility gives people the opportunity to be who they are and not feel othered or to feel bad or shame.
Exactly. And I think you can't underestimate the power of being able to see externally, especially I think when you're a young person, what you're feeling or thinking on the inside and realizing, wow, I'm not by myself and I'm not alone. And I might have been in a community where I wasn't seeing those things. And so I felt very alone. And this
Right.
is an opportunity to realize, may not be anyone that I'm aware of near me, but I'm not by myself. There is a community out there for me, and that's so powerful. Well, another kind of thought that occurs to me is, because we talk about some of these things all the time, but not everyone may even know what those acronyms stand for, and we're throwing out these words LGBTQIA plus, and that's not all of them. Those are many of them, but I thought maybe we just could take a moment and I could just ask you if you could kind of explain what that acronym stands for and why we use it and why
Yeah.
it keeps changing.
Right. It's changing all the time. So LGBTQIA plus. So L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bisexual, T is transgender or trans, Q is questioning or queer. Sometimes you'll see LGBTQQ. I is intersex. A is asexual. And the plus is just an attempt to say, like, there's so many other terms. There's so many other ways that people identify under the rainbow umbrella or whatever you want to call that. So we know we can't list it all out, but here's kind of a general sense. And that's morphed and changed over time, of which letters are there, the plus sign being there to include more people. And even just folks like for myself, sometimes I'll conflate LGBTQIA with just the queer community. And I feel comfortable saying that as a queer person because I know intentionally what I mean by that. And usually the people I'm saying that to, I understand the context of who I'm around and they understand it. Knowing that historically the term queer has felt bad for some people because it has been used against them. So there's been a lot of reclaiming of that term. And I would say that queer better fits for me, my sexual identity, whereas trans better fits my gender identity and how I present to the world.
Certainly.
And those terms, they have like meanings you could look up in the dictionary, but I think the more you get to know queer community, people also have a little bit of their own take on all of these terms. So it's really important to know that like gatekeeping is not worth our time. If someone says that they are any of those letters, then that's what they are, and we don't need to debate.
Yes. And I might even add that maybe talk about how that kind of over the course of someone's own development and awareness, how that those terms might change and differ, or there's a lot of what you might not always see on the outside, internal struggle, right? Of like, well, am I bi or am I pan or am I polysexual or is queer fine? You know, there's a lot of this internal struggle that happens.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of that?
Yeah, for me, I remember, I feel like I always go back to like walking to my school playground. I remember I was like internally thinking about how I felt like a tomboy, but I don't think I had any language at that time around trans people even existing. Like, it just wasn't a thing. I probably had like outdated terms in mind, but at that time I just thought, oh, I wish I was a boy, but never said that to other people. And then with sexuality, I knew that at that time, though, I saw myself as a woman and was attracted to other women. And so that has obviously morphed over time where now I don't identify as a lesbian. I have fond memories of that. I would joke that I'm a classically trained lesbian. That's my roots. Can't really get rid of that. But I identify now as transmasculine non-binary. And even when I first came out, I was using he and they pronouns. And I think part of that was because I almost felt like I needed to have he pronouns as a transmasculine person because people were already going to assume that I was maybe because I was taking testosterone and I was going to grow facial hair. But at the end of the day, I was like, but it's just not accurate for me. Like, I identify as a unicorn jokingly, but also it's like, I don't see myself as a man or a woman. Right. I have a body that I feel really good in, and I've done the things I felt like I needed to really align myself with that. And so it's changed over time. And even now I'm like, am I queer? Am I bisexual? Am I pansexual? Like, which term feels right? Those all feel fine enough. And then you reach a point where you're like, those terms work, whatever it is. What matters most is that the people I'm with get who I am, even if those terms fall short. So they can change all the time. And young people, like, what they should be doing in their development is questioning and changing and trying things on. Yeah. So it's completely normal that could change a myriad.
Exactly. It's funny you say that because that's where I was going with that. It's like we're adults and we still go through these constant internal struggles about how we express ourselves and define ourselves. And young people, it's kind of like it's the definition of their stage of development, right? Is I am in a process of identity development, and that's going to include my sexuality and my gender expression and who I feel romantic towards and who I feel non-romantic towards, etc.
What an exciting time too. Like,
yes.
So celebratory of like, cool, you're trying on something new. Let's get into that. It doesn't impact me. So like, let's just do it.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to those terms, something I love is that it's always fluctuating. And we'll get more into this later, but for those guests that are joining us that aren't as familiar with those terms, that there are more and they are always evolving, and always folks are creatively or working towards trying to find that perfect language that fits and says, this is what I'm all about, and this is who I am, and this is how I express myself to the world. And I love your attitude about taking that on with this optimism, right? Like, that's exciting. It's exciting that we're not stuck in a box, right? And that we can fluctuate in and out, and sometimes turn the box into a circle or a diamond or whatever we need it to. Speaking of young people, is there any kind of history that's specific when it comes to pride and youth specifically, or kind of as a consultant and what you've seen in your professional career, what are you noticing is kind of that relationship between Pride Month and young people?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like sometimes that history to me feels maybe under documented, like that
Yeah.
I think, we don't always think about youth movements as well as we should, but this year I think has probably challenged people to think differently about young people and the power they have in collective movements.
Yes.
And so for Pride and Youth, I think of how I didn't grow up knowing about Pride celebrations. And like the first time there was a Pride in my hometown, I had already left and I came back to see it and it felt small and adorable because I was also like, this doesn't happen, but it gave a space for both youth and adults and elders to be in a space together, knowing that we're all queer here and we're in a town that, we don't always have places to come together, but this is our time to be together. And so when I think of Pride in Youth, I think of the generations we're seeing right now where like so many youth identify in some way in the community. And it's not, I think people try to, I don't know, devalue it by saying it's something about a trend. And I think it's more about young people finally feel comfort and safety in their connections and in their spaces to explore and to try things on and to figure out what fits them and to support each other instead of bullying each other. That still occurs. But I think we're getting to a place where young people are like, I want to go to school. I want to use they, them pronouns. And I also don't want us to make a big deal about it. I just want to be who I am.
Right.
And when I go to Pride in Portland pre-COVID, it was a total mix from like toddlers to adults that were at parades and at booths and doing the different things. And so I think we would be missing something if we didn't realize that Pride includes young people and they're the future of our community in so many ways. And so I've also just appreciated when young people come to Pride and they do like booths and things, you get their take on their identities, you get their expression of their identities.
Right.
And that's different. And I like seeing that. I want to see the full community. So yeah.
That's great and exciting. Well, if it's okay, I'd like to change gears a little bit and talk a little bit about young people and kind of the relationship of being part of the LGBTQI community and mental health issues. The Trevor Project is a national organization that operates helplines and support services for young people specifically who are identify as LGBTQIA+. They also more recently have begun doing these national surveys on LGBTQ mental health. And I will post these reports on Facebook. We're looking at one from 2020. And I want to just kind of go over some statistics because I think they are alarming and they are also kind of eye-opening, and they kind of, at least when I read them, my first reaction is this is a call to action when I see these statistics because they're not acceptable. And so I want to share the statistics, a few of them. I won't get into the full report, but I'll make sure this report's available for anyone who wants to look at it. And when I say study, I just want to point out that this is a really large study. We're talking 40,000 young people between the ages of 13 and 24 identifying as LGBTQ, and across all 50 states, and also representing both rural and urban environments. So this is that's a huge population sample for those of us who know about data and statistics. So some of the key findings that kind of stuck out to me that I'd like to share, and then maybe we can have a conversation about, is the first one is that 40% of the respondents seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months, with more than half of those identifying as transgender or non-binary young people. So that's almost half, very concerning. 68% of the respondents reported symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder, including more than 3 in 4 transgender and non-binary youth. Just about 50%, 48% of youth reported engaging in some type of self-harm behavior in the last 12 months, including over 60% for transgender and non-binary youth. And then 30% having experienced homelessness or have been kicked out of their home or ran away due to circumstances that were not safe in their environment. And then 1 in 3 reporting that they had been physically threatened or harmed in their lifetime due specifically to their LGBTQ identity. These statistics alarm me. What are your thoughts on these statistics?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a huge surprise to folks in the community that most of the just statistics we have don't feel great. They feel really hard. The last statistic they have in this report that I appreciate, it says transgender non-binary youth who reported having pronouns respected by all or most of the people in their lives attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected. That's just pronouns. That's just affirming people's pronouns at a basic level has cut that rate in half. And so I think it's something I will like say till I die is that suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth is affirming them. Loving and affirming and accepting youth as who they say they are is suicide prevention. And when we don't do that and we kind of put ourselves first in our discomfort, we end up losing young people that don't need to end their lives. So I think these numbers really call that out for me, that there's something that there's also an easy solution to fix some of these numbers. They don't have to be this bleak. And I think that when I recently talked to some youth in a state, and it was an LGBTQ focused event, we were talking about what statistics can I bring to the youth to kind of understand the community better. And it was like, I don't want to drop on them, here's all the bad outcomes that are projected to potentially happen in your lifetime. We know that. What we don't know is like, what are positive futures? What does it look like to see you doing any types of things? So instead of talking more about statistics, I talked about here's a lot of LGBTQ icons who have existed or are still alive and the things they've done with their lives to see that we have futures. We can be politicians, we could be celebrities, we could even just be a grassroots organizer that's never recognized and still get so much joy out of our lives. That it's important to balance that, especially in Pride Month, because I want to be realistic about how hard living in some of these systems are. There's systemic oppression that's especially layered and intersectionally intense for folks who are at multiple identity intersections. But we also have the ability to be so resilient and to create like magical things that like they don't happen unless it was the queer community. You know, every time I watch TV, even there's so much about media that is influenced by the queer community and the queer community of color that we don't always recognize. We got that from them. And if they had never done that, we might not have ever had this kind of entertainment. So I think of that as a way of kind of honoring and holding Pride Month as a sacred time of acknowledging how much we have gotten from community and how much we need to kind of respect that and pay that back for the numbers that we see in reports like this.
Exactly. And off camera, and as we were preparing for this interview, you and I had talked about like, where are all the good statistics, right? It's so hard to find them. And, but I think what you say really just kind of really is on point, that these are terrible statistics. One, and I just want to make sure people hear that really clearly. There is some very low hanging fruit to help with these statistics, which is just affirming life, right? And really creating safe space by doing things that are simple, like address people the way they wish to be addressed.
Help people find access to services, give them
housing. Exactly. All that. I think it also really speaks a lot to youth culture when you mention this, pointing out these icons and this very visible folks. And I think maybe sometimes with adults, and we're not always understanding that youth culture, even things as simple as like, why is everyone so excited about Little Nas in their videos, right? Why is that such a big deal? And it's because of that very visibility, high level of like, this person's living their best life and unashamed and unafraid and has power that's growing as a result. And that's affirming for everyone in the community. And I love what you said about just even on maybe not always celebrities and all these other things, but just on the simple level, right? Just as adults who are in the community or allies of that community, just we're everywhere, right? We're teachers, we're police officers, we're male persons, right? We're all doing these regular jobs and we're part of that community is a big deal and affirming. Right. So this isn't what else to stick out to me. This study is this growing trend, and it's not the only study I've seen this in, where young people, especially more than than maybe in generations past are getting more and more comfortable identifying themselves in kind of non-binary ways. They're a lot more identifying as more fluid in nature, right, in terms of their identity and their sexuality. But that trend, I think sometimes for adults, and this is me kind of talking about youth culture a lot, is the trend can sometimes make it challenging when you're not familiar with all those terms, right? And even terms such as queer and non-binary. So as someone who grew up in the 90s like myself, these were not terms that were used when I was a youth, and I didn't know those terms existed. I wish I had. It would have been helpful. I knew of queer, like you had mentioned, as a derogatory term, not necessarily an affirming term. And so I noticed the study kind of listed some things that young people self-identified with, and well over 100 different types of sexual identities or gender identities. And I can't read them all. Again, I encourage anyone listening to kind of go check out the study yourself. But some of them that I think are growing, especially among youth, as more common are things like homo or heteroflexible, this idea of being demisexual, being sexually fluid, pan-romantic or pansexual. Can you talk a little bit about some of these kind of new terms and kind of give a little bit of understanding for folks on what they mean?
Yeah,
start there.
I think that a lot of this is about like language still falls short, even with hundreds and hundreds of terms. Sometimes it still doesn't do enough to say, this is who I am, and this is the best way I can tell you who I am. But I think that the beauty of language and the beauty of visibility and community growing is that people are finding more terms to fit who they are and realizing, oh, maybe I am a part of this community too. Maybe this feeling I'm having fits under this umbrella. I'm going to decide that I'm going to claim this versus I think we see language as like someone somewhere has created the dictionary and they get to decide what words exist and what they mean, right?
Right.
So much of this is about us saying, this is the word I want to use. This is what fits me. This is what feels good. Terms we've heard forever is butch, right? And butch looks different in the community for different people, but we also can still kind of assume, I know what butch means when I see it,
Sure.
I know what femme means. And I think there's even, there's debate around like people feeling like the term cisgender is derogatory or mean. I think it's about saying this is a term to just acknowledge who you are. It's not to use it against you. It's just to say like who you are is not who I am. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that we're different. And for some people, that term makes all the difference in feeling seen or visible, not cisgender, but just transgender or anything else. And I think the other thing that comes to mind with all these terms is it just gives people, I think, more freedom to experiment and try things on and to figure out who you are and to experience different things. To say, maybe I want to try polyamory. Maybe I want to try to be pansexual, and because I think I'm attracted to all kinds of people. I think that's really important. And I think that's partially why even the term questioning came to exist. For a while, I was like, is questioning an identity? And I think in some ways it is. It's this place of like, I'm not sure what I am, but this term definitely will help me say like, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm just kind of looking around.
I know I have a lived experience. I don't know if I can articulate it quite yet. And so I'm in that metamorphosis.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And again, I love the idea of just kind of thinking about this from that strength-based way, the way you do, right? Which is that this is something that should be celebrated as creative and full of strength. This idea that everyone, but young people especially, are finding ways to kind of share their lived experiences and help communicate their wants and needs and desires in a way that makes sense to them. And that's actually powerful and has a lot of power, especially if we as adults affirm it, right? And allow for it and create a space to kind of be in that place. That's
I think
important.
young people are finding that they want to use the terms that match who they are. So we're seeing it increase because young people have more access to social media that is putting out more information that gives you more opportunity to say, oh, I think that might be who I am, and finding in school or other settings the ability to say those things. Once one classmate does it, it might make it that much easier. Then versus when I was in high school, I couldn't even imagine telling people the feelings I was having because I was so sure that something bad was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I was, I think, right at that edge of like where things were already shifting anyways into a better place. But having these terms feels like so empowering.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think this is a good place. We'll get a little bit more into allyship and kind of how we can be supportive, but this is a good place to maybe comment that if you hear a term that you're unfamiliar with, or you want to learn more about these things, that the young person in front of you, while they are a member of that community and expert, they are not like the representative of the entire community. And sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming to put people in that position. And so a very simple Google search will often yield more than you could ever imagine in terms of what you want to know about these types of things. But do you have other advice in terms of how to kind of learn and keep, if you want to keep in the know with youth culture and kind of how things are constantly moving and changing when it comes to the LGBTQ community, where some places folks could go?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is be willing for someone to say no. So if you ask a question, hey, I want to know more about this, or what does this mean? At least be willing for them to say, I don't really want to talk about that. Or I'd prefer not to have to explain myself right now. I think that we're not always even comfortable with that. So young people especially get put in positions, especially if they've been in systems, to basically, if you're asked a question, you must divulge the answer. Instead of the empowering place of saying, we should be teaching boundaries all the time. If you don't want to share that, you shouldn't have to. So my first thought is be okay with people not answering and it not being something against you, right? I may have answered that question 4 other times today and been like, I have one more person ask me what my identity is, you know?
Right.
But I think there's also some people who like myself are like, yeah, if I have the time and capacity, I want to help you understand because I know you're genuinely coming to me to just have more information.
Sure.
So Google is of course one place, but social media gives us so much access to information. And that's honestly how I even kind of feel like I keep up to date on what's happening, both because I can't always go out right now with COVID in the same ways I used to go out to community events or to even a party. But with social media, I can follow influencers or just friends who are queer who are posting maybe an infographic or a video. I can watch shows. I can find out new information that's come out or new articles. So I would say get connected into some people in the community. You probably know someone or multiple someones already, and see what you can find on social media, because that honestly sometimes will tell you more than like an official organization, right? Like Trevor Project knows a lot, right? But they don't still stand as the kind of place that is the know-it-all of all things LGBTQ, same as HRC or any of those. So get to know the real live community, because I think that will also tell you like what's happening in the world today, right now. Yeah, and just be curious, just ask questions. I think that's helpful, and make them respectful and be willing to hear a no.
Great, excellent. Well, let's shift gears and kind of dive a little bit deeper. So we've talked about LGBTQ youth, but our focus, especially here at OKSA, is really on young people who have experiences in foster care. And so let's take a moment just to kind of uplift those young people. And so first, this is a little quote from the Human Rights Campaign Foundation that I found really kind of a powerful way to think about this. And so I'm going to share it and then get your thoughts on it, Elliot. It's undeniable that great progress is underway towards LGBTQ equality in the United States. Marriage equality swept the nation. The lived experiences of transgender Americans are more visible than ever before, and many youth are coming to identify as LGBTQ in environments far more welcoming and affirming than could have been imagined just a decade ago. However, this progress is not felt by all members of the LGBTQ community, and too many LGBTQ youth come out to family members only to face rejection, hatred, and violence. And those facing the most extreme levels of family rejection and maltreatment are often forced out of their homes, or run away, or become homeless, or enter the foster care system. And a report from Safe Havens kind of indicates that LGBTQ youth in foster care are overrepresented. And for those of you that don't know that term, meaning there are more youth that identify as LGBTQ in foster care than would be the average for the general community at large, right? So there's this overrepresentation of LGBTQ youth in the system. So Elliot, if you could just share some of your thoughts about kind of the experiences around that intersectionality is the way I think of it, as identifying as LGBTQ youth, but also identifying as a young person in foster care.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Safe Haven report from Lambda Legal, CSSP, Center for Study of Social Policy, and Children's Rights is definitely one helpful place to start. There was also a issue brief from Trevor Project specifically for LGBTQ youth with a history of care that came out this past May. And even that talks about how the intersection of foster care and LGBTQ identity increased the potential for a young person to end their life even more than that, the numbers we were hearing earlier. So an LGBTQ youth that was not in foster care might have had a 13% chance of ending their life, whereas an LGBTQ youth who was in foster care had a 35% chance. LGBTQ youth of color, it was 16%, whereas LGBTQ youth of color in foster care, it was 38%. So there's this the kind of doubling down that happens where folks are not affirmed, they're in a system that probably is already oppressing them in other ways or struggling to support and meet their needs. And so I think it's really important for us to be thinking about what is that about and how do we fix it? Some of those low-hanging fruits we were talking about earlier, because for me, when I was in care, I didn't come out until I was out of care. I didn't come out until I was out of care because I was like, now my housing is on me. My employment, my schooling is on me. So if I decide to come out, the only people who could take that away from me are like a discriminatory housing office at college. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
So, but I needed that level of kind of security to feel like I could step out of care, even without being adopted or having permanent family, and saying like, well, this is what I need to do and I can do it now. And I remember when I came out later, I had someone who was a foster parent who reached out and kind of wondered like, why didn't you feel like you could come out to me? And I said, you know, there was a time we were watching a show, you made a comment because there was lesbians kissing and you didn't like it. And internally in my body at that time as a youth, I thought, okay, I can't come out to this person. Like that was all I needed, was a small kind of like, to know, like, I don't feel like I can tell this person who I am, which means I'm going to carry this identity until I am 19, 20. I think I was probably 16. And I just can't be who I am, which is a layer of depression that can come up and other things because I don't get to fully show the world who I am. And that means I'm only showing up part of the way, and people can't fully understand why is Elliot grumpy, or why is Elliot not finishing schoolwork, or whatever that is. You won't get the full picture if you're not willing to see the full picture and accept that. So I think for young people, especially young people in care, there's a struggle even still today to find affirming homes, to recruit LGBTQ foster parents who want to stay working with a system that can make it really hard even for them. For there to be enough adoptive families, even if they're straight and cisgender, to adopt and affirm LGBTQ youth. And just to live in a system is hard. You know, a system isn't a family, it's not parents. And so when you're also struggling with your identity and the world is giving you a lot of complicated messaging about that, it's no surprise that it creates kind of a tornado of thoughts and emotions and trying to figure out what is up from down. So I want so much for young people that are queer in foster care or were in care to get the community they need, even if it just starts with one kind of like champion for that young person who's like, I love you no matter who you are, and I'm going to stick to that until you get to where you need to be. Like those are the people that help carry me through. Even just one adult, you know, can make that difference. So that's really important.
That's a great answer, and it makes me think of a couple of things. One is this, I think maybe raising some awareness of this experience of coming out and this process of coming out, or in some circles, we're changing that language to say letting in, which I think really amplifies kind of what it is, right? Which is, it's not that I was ever not this, it's just that I decided, just like in your example, I decided not to share that because of the environment around me. And so I didn't let you in on that particular aspect of who I am. But can you talk a little bit about some of the dynamics there about like, you know, just because someone may choose not to let folks in, that's intentional, and what some of the risks are if we pry or try to out them too quickly, or if we reveal that on their behalf.
Yeah, something I've been thinking about with like policy work for LGBTQ youth is like, is it better to create policy that's specifically for LGBTQ youth, or is it better to create policy that applies to all youth? Because at any time, someone could say, I am non-binary, or I'm trans, or I'm a lesbian, or any of those things. And we don't all have to necessarily live out. And we may not feel safe to live out. And so how do we create systems or whatever supports that can acknowledge lack of visibility, not as hiding either? And because everyone just has a different relationship to that. But I also think it's important, especially when I think of folks that are system involved, if a young person tells you what their identity is, it is really crucial for you to have a conversation about, do the people at home know this about you? If they found out about this, what do you think they would think? Should this be a conversation that we just have right now? And this, you get to use the name you need while we hang out and you're figuring this out. But those questions are so important, because if a young person gets all the support from you to come out and be who they are, that can be great, but it can also backfire if they go home and they say, Mom, Dad, whoever, this is who I am, and that home isn't affirming. It's so tricky. So it's important to support youth, but it's also, if you can and you're more of the adult in the situation, to really think about, okay, there could be implications here, so let's just make sure you understand what could happen. Because for me, I could have lost housing. I could have been a youth who was just like left care and tried to make it work and couch surfed. And instead I just was like, I'll just play the game. I'll be straight and I'll be cisgender and I will get through. And then I get to be fully me in a few years. But man, I wish I could have just been a kid who was figuring that out,
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like there was the safety to do that with anyone. So I think giving people the opportunity to be who they are, while keeping in mind that we don't quite live in a world where everyone has the best interest of LGBTQ youth in mind. And how do we help them navigate that to keep them safe?
Certainly. The other thing that you said that kind of stuck out to me was how every interaction matters, right? Like even these off-cuff comments that can be microaggressive or reveal a bias that maybe this person's not aware of about their feelings about someone in the LGBTQ community, can live with someone for a long time and make really kind of is the linchpin in whether how a relationship grows or comes apart, right? And so I guess that kind of leads me to be thinking about, we use these words like, we need to be more affirming and we need to create spaces that are inclusive, right? But to me, it kind of, that gets a little big and hard to grasp onto because it's not very concrete, right? So what might be some concrete ways when we say these words like young people need inclusive spaces and affirming spaces? What might be some things like how we're thoughtful of our interactions that we can do?
Yeah, I think, every interaction that a young person has with an adult potentially carries every other adult before you, right? So like a young person can interact with me, but any trust, any harm that's happened, until proven otherwise, they might assume that I will do the same thing. So how do I create environments where every single thing I'm saying is intentional, in the sense of working out of my vocabulary microaggressive comments, working out of my vocabulary things that we say that are kind of like phrases that we say without thinking about it? And I'm trying to like think of an example of one, but I mean, something that used to happen all the time is people would say, "That's so gay," right? And this was a combination of like good and bad and complicated. I don't think a lot of people do that now, but it's one of those moments where you might say it and not actually think about it as like a homophobic comment. You're just like, oh, this is just the language we use. But the problem is that interaction or that statement could tell a young person, okay, so I can't talk to this adult and I can't be who I am in this entire space because this adult works here. So now I've marked this entire organization as, I'm not sure that it's queer friendly. So everything we do, whether it's putting up signage, the conversations we're willing to have, and we actively seek out the events we put on for young people, the way we include them in those things makes a huge difference. I think it shows them that like, you tell us what you need, you tell us who you are and how we can support that. We don't actually need to have all the answers of how to do it. But if we don't ask you, of course we won't know. I think that is really important for young people to get to speak to what they need versus adults trying to figure out, I think that they'll like this, or I think this is how we should do this thing, because we're not youth anymore. We're different. And so,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I like the way you kind of speak to this kind of, how do I just ask more and talk less or tell less, right? And how do I work with somebody as opposed to kind of just doing things to them or for them, which really kind of speaks to that, because as we had indicated, right, there's a lot of reasons why someone may not be out with you. There's a lot of reasons why someone, and that can also include not knowing myself, right, that I might not be out with myself yet. And especially when we're looking back at these trends, like more and more young people identifying as non-binary, more and more young people being kind of sexually fluid and flexible, that, we have to be thinking about kind of what are some things that we're doing, to kind of create that space. So as we had indicated, right, we feel that, that's healthy development and that's good and that's normal, but how can adults kind of support that healthy development and that exploration and really honor that curiosity and that willingness to let folks kind of explore those things, without kind of creating a space that becomes judgmental, right? And an example I thought of was, and this kind of is one of those bias things that people don't realize, right? But like when you're playing around with clothing, right? Like maybe you want to dress more androgynously, or I want to express myself more femininely, and maybe people see me more male, right? And so it's like, why are you wearing a dress, or why are you dressed like a girl today, right? Even so, that would be an example to me of suddenly now I've created a very unsafe space, and I feel super awkward that I'm wearing a skirt right now or whatever, right? And so, what are some other examples of ways folks can kind of be careful about honoring that exploration and curiosity?
Yeah, I think it's just like meeting it with curiosity and excitement. So like with clothing, if a young person says, I think that maybe my gender is this, or I think that I want to express myself more femininely or whatever, great, let's go shopping. Let's be excited. We don't need to make any critiques or judgmental comments about what someone likes or tries on. Often, I think that has more to do with us and our discomfort. So like inside thoughts to work through, right? And I think that is some of the spaces that it gives young people the opportunity to explore, and we don't have to have it all figured out. So if I go shopping with Sarah and Sarah wants to try on all boy clothing, but also Sarah's like, it doesn't mean I'm trans. It just means I want to wear boy clothing that also shouldn't be labeled as boy clothing. It's a t-shirt,
Exactly.
like gender in and of itself needs to be complicated and why inanimate objects are gendered. But I think that young people just want the opportunity to explore, and we can totally join them in that. We can say, hey, I heard that you like this. Do you want to watch this movie? I found this book. Do you want to take a trip to visit that thing? Anything that kind of tells them that, like, I want to engage in this with you if you want me there. Also, if you don't, I can back off. But if you will need to go shopping, or you want to go check out a health clinic because you want to understand what your sexuality means for healthy sexual education and development, great, let's do that. But anytime we shut those things down are always the opportunities for young people to potentially turn to the wrong information, to go to maybe a source that isn't as trustworthy. So if we are given the opportunity and kind of the sacred opportunity to help a young person explore, meet them with excitement and curiosity, and that will take you so far, versus trying to have it all figured out and trying to contain it into what also is the gatekeeping of like, well, I thought you said you're non-binary, so why are you doing this thing? Like, that doesn't matter. They're still non-binary.
Of course, exactly. You bring up this really great point that, we all, I think even sometimes when we're trying really hard to be supportive, sometimes it might not land right as adults, and we have to give ourselves a little grace with that. And maybe something that you said reminds me of some studies happening at OU around the science of hope, and that this idea that sometimes just having a lot of optimism and hope for someone creates optimism and hope in the person too, right? That it builds. And so I think that point you made is just well put, that it's just having excitement and optimism about someone's future, as opposed to sometimes the historically other things that we're told, like, I'm just worried for your future, and I'm worried about what's going to happen to you, and all those types of things. Well, any other final thoughts or anything that you have in terms of kind of what young people who identify as LGBTQIA who are in foster care need from the system or from individuals to kind of experience well-being and develop healthy, successful lives? Yeah,
I think from something we mentioned early on about visibility, it isn't helpful to like create environments that visually look LGBTQ supportive if the culture isn't that. That is a trap also. So if I walk into a business and I'm like, cool, they have rainbow flags, they say trans people are real people, whatever the supportive statements are. But the
Yeah,
second I get to the counter, I have a horrible interaction. Like,
sure.
well, then why do that? So I would say any work that you do to work on this topic, whether it's youth, adults, whatever it is, don't start with just the visual aspect, but start with the cultural change. Like, what is the
Yeah,
experience someone has in this space? And if it's not what we're trying to get at, what do we need to change? And then add on the visual extra that helps with that. Because otherwise, yeah, I think it can mislead folks to think that they're in an environment that feels good and right for them when it's just not there yet. And I think having like the humility to just say like, you know what, I don't know, but I can go look into it, or let's find out together how to do that or what that means. But I think we fear so much of saying the wrong thing and getting it wrong that it stops us from doing anything at all. And that can't be the answer either.
of course, of course. Uh, Another really great way young people can feel supported and find those affirming spaces is sometimes to go outside their homes, right? And find resources in other places outside the home. Even if we're the most greatest supportive people on earth, young people need peers, they need other experiences beyond their caregivers and caseworkers, right? And so what are some of those resources or services that you would point folks to if, or if there are young people listening to this interview that might be interested in like, where could I go if I want to kind of connect?
Yeah, so the harder one is definitely the connection piece, but I know there's support services. So like Trans Lifeline is a transgender specific hotline for folks experiencing, suicidal ideation or mental health stress. But that doesn't mean you can't call and say, I just need to talk to someone who understands me.
Yeah.
Similarly, the Trevor Project. There's also a really cool resource called, I believe it's Stand with Trans, and it's like ally moms and ally dads. And what that has to do with is basically parents who have volunteered to be like a stand-in parent on the phone, just for like a young person or another parent to call and say, I just need like someone supportive to talk to me. And that's an opportunity for someone to connect. I think more places with COVID tried to create like virtual youth support groups and things like that. And I think some of that will probably shift back to in person. But if you can find anything like that in your community, that can go a long way to start getting you connected in. So if there's an LGBTQ resource center in your town or even in your state, you may not be in the same city, but likely you can call them and say, is there anything near me or someone I can connect to? Which can feel hard to pick up the phone and do, but it can take you a long way and get you connected into what's out there. Because when I look at even the South, there's a lot of grassroots efforts that aren't like largely public, but they're fully happening. And so it's
Yeah.
just a matter of getting connected and asking around a bit to see where you can get plugged in.
Excellent. Okay. And for those of you that are watching, I will make sure that these links that Elliot are mentioning are getting posted into the Facebook feed in the comments. All right. Well, Elliot, how would people get in touch with you or what you do? So you're doing something called Exchange for Change. And then also there's the Unicorn Solutions. How do people get in touch with you?
So one place you can go is exchangeforchange.org. So that exchangeforchange.org. You can find out more about what the exchange is, the events that we put on, the podcasts that I help with, where you can learn more about LGBTQ youth, foster care, system involvement. We've had some really great people that we got to interview, so to check that out. Another way to connect with me, I think James can put my email, is just my last name and my first name at gmail.com. So Hinkle Elliot. It's a great way to reach me. I'll try to keep an eye on my spam, but if you ever have questions or think that you would want to talk about consulting, policy development, or training, I'm happy to connect with people. And here very soon, I should have a website, Unicorn Solutions. And so you'll be able to find resources and ways to engage in that way.
Excellent. And how can folks find you on social media?
Yes, so on Instagram, I am Elliot the Unicorn, and that's a way that you can stay in touch with me. It's a public Instagram, so I interact with people there, and it kind of has documented my transition, but also just like anything related to gender and things like this event. And so that's definitely a great way to stay connected with me that I anyone can add me, and it's not just my personal. So
Definitely. And I follow it in full disclosure, and I love it. It's the cutest feed ever. So that's a great place to go if you're interested in learning more. All right. Well, last question, Elliot, and then we'll have to sign off. So what, any kind of big recommendations for you in terms of how to celebrate Pride Month, whether you're a member of the community or you're an ally or just someone trying to learn more? What are some kind of your go-to, like, here's some great ways to kind of get involved in Pride?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways. I think you can see if there's events, whether it's virtual or in person around you, and go to them and support them and be positive energy, or let people that are LGBTQ around you know about them in case they didn't know. I think you can support it by volunteering your time for those efforts so that queer people don't just have to like staff and man these things, but they can also go and enjoy it. You can donate directly to LGBTQ people, whether that's just literally asking them, hey, I just wanted to throw some money your way because you're a queer person in a world that's like doesn't love you all the time. That is totally reasonable and highly supported. And then I think the other thing is just like take time to educate yourself, which doesn't have to feel like school or education, but go watch Pose. Go watch Pose on, I think it's on Netflix and FX. You can watch Legendary on HBO. There's lots of movies that have come out more recently that I think are worth it. Podcasts and different books, but all of those things I think are really worth it. And then if I can find the book before we go, oh, here, let me grab it real quick. There is this book called Free to Be Me. It's an LGBTQ journal of love, pride, and finding your inner rainbow. You can get it, I think, on Amazon and other places. But this is a great journal book for a young person who's just kind of figuring out who they are, and it takes them through so many different things. So Free to Be Me by Dom and Inc. Really worth it for young people and even adults.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elliot, for sharing your time and your story and your energy with us today and helping us grow in our awareness and uplifting the lives of young people all around the nation. You do great work, and I'm so glad to know you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And join us on Friday. We'll be connecting with Yes, I Can to talk about the pandemic relief aid here in the state of Oklahoma and how young people who've experienced the foster care system can access that aid. And we have Teen Conference coming up June 15th through the 17th. So if you are already registered for Teens Conference, we'll see you there. And if not, you can reach out to the OKSA program and we'll help you learn more. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Elliot.
Bye.